Fourth thing to remember is we should practice to use rich words. We always tend to use common or dead words such as said, went, and put. In order to have much better sentence, use words that describes the action. Like for example, the word went. Instead of saying my dad went to work, say my dad raced to work. Another example is the word said. Jane said she had a secret. Instead of saying that, say Jane whispered to Peter a wonderful secret. Here are some of the substitute words you might consider in writing a narrative essay. Instead of saying good, say admirable, acceptable, commendable, praiseworthy, and so on. Instead of using big, use considerable, immense, sizable, vast, prominent, and etc. Also, instead of using small, say immature, minute, slight, petty, trivial, and limited. Those are just some of the examples that you might consider in order to avoid the dead words. Fifth thing to remember is to use wow words, or by showing your reader a high quality, extraordinary, and incomparable vocabulary by using 5th grade vocabulary words. Or in other words, these are the terms that are outside the regular vocabulary that will make your reader say wow. Sixth thing to remember is what we call the show, don't tell. The show, don't tell method of writing is where the author make the reader visualize in order for the reader's thoughts to escape the overuse of meaningless phrases such as said, went, or big. To give you an idea, here's how to do it correctly. Instead of just saying Susan exercise, try to expound it like sweat poured from Susan's forehead as she continued to do 100 sit-ups. Seventh thing to remember is how to write a conversation appropriately. Here are the 5 rules in writing a direct quotation. Rule number 1 is to add quotation marks to identify words that someone has said. Rule number 2 is to separate source phrase from quote. Rule number 3 is to capitalize the first word of the direct quotation. Rule number 4 is to add proper punctuation marks to end a conversation. And last, rule number 5, add needed capitalization and punctuation. Also keep in mind that you must make a new paragraph every time a different person speaks. Eighth thing to remember is to vary your sentences. Here are some of the guide questions you might consider in writing a narrative essay. First, are some of the sentences long and others short? Second, do you start the beginnings differently? Third, do some sentences start with part of speech other than noun or pronoun? Second to the last thing to remember is to add figurative language such as simile, metaphor, alliteration, and onomatopoeia to add interest to the story. Moreover, it will make the story more enjoyable to read while also allowing the reader to have a better understanding on what the author is trying to convey. Last thing to remember will be the plot structure, wherein it composes the plot, which includes the characters and settings, the climax wherein the problem is already solved, and of course, an ending. And that's it for the 10 things you need to keep in mind in writing a narrative. I hope you've learned and remember it too. Now let's proceed to the next speaker, Miss Jonalyn Taruk.